science plays a vital role for economic development and societal well-being. Understanding this, the Academy of Sciences Malaysia was established with a mission to be Malaysia's thought leader in all areas of science, technology, and innovation. To realize its mission, ASM harnesses the nation's top scientific minds to chart the STI direction and facilitates the implementation of an innovation-led economy for the country. ASM's commitment lies firmly in fostering a culture of excellence in STI in Malaysia. ASM does this by providing independent, credible, relevant, and timely STI input of national and international importance to the country. Our network of expertise comprises Malaysian scientists, engineers, and technologists who specialize in various disciplines. The Academy assists in upgrading the nation's technological capabilities in the industrial sectors by producing high-quality publications such as peer-reviewed journals, monographs, and books. In addition, ASM also provides input on current and future technology trends to be considered and taken up by the government in driving the nation's economy forward. To provide Malaysian scientists with the best opportunities and exposure, ASM actively extends its international networks and collaborations. It currently has a range of multilateral engagements with renowned scientific institutions worldwide. The Academy also champions the need to grow the right talent in STI by cultivating interests in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to the younger generation. In short, the Academy's ethos is proudly defined as Think Science, Celebrate Technology, Inspire Innovation. science plays a vital role for economic development and societal well-being. Understanding this, the Academy of Sciences Malaysia was established with a mission to be Malaysia's thought leader in all areas of science, technology, and innovation. To realize its mission, ASM harnesses the nation's top scientific minds to chart the STI direction and facilitates the implementation of an innovation-led economy for the country. ASM's commitment lies firmly in fostering a culture of excellence in STI in Malaysia. ASM does this by providing independent, credible, relevant, and timely STI input of national and international importance to the country. Our network of expertise comprises Malaysian scientists, engineers, and technologists who specialize in various disciplines. The Academy assists in upgrading the nation's technological capabilities in the industrial sectors by producing high-quality publications such as peer-reviewed journals, monographs, and books. In addition, ASM also provides input on current and future technology trends to be considered and taken up by the government in driving the nation's economy forward. To provide Malaysian scientists with the best opportunities and exposure, ASM actively extends its international networks and collaborations. It currently has a range of multilateral engagements with renowned scientific institutions worldwide. The Academy also champions the need to grow the right talent in STI by cultivating interests in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to the younger generation. In short, the Academy's ethos is proudly defined as Think Science, Celebrate Technology, Inspire Innovation.
Is it me or?
Hi everyone. Very good afternoon and good morning or evening to wherever you are. Welcome to this session on smart people, first cities in the tropics. First and foremost, I'd like to congratulate the Mahathir Science Award Foundation because I think this international conference on tropical science is more than timely. I think when we say the word tropics, we always relate to the geographical location of where these tropics are and also the climate that we commonly share. However, I think we also need to note that the tropics is where almost 45% of the world's population is living. And it is estimated that by 2050, almost more than half of the world's population is going to live in the tropics. And when we talk about the tropics is also going through rapid urbanization, and a lot of issues as well is being faced in the tropics, especially with regards to deforestation and issues with regards to environmental change. This is why we've got this interesting discussion that's going to be discussed by our very interesting four panelists. And we'll be talking about how the tropics, its people, and the cities, first cities in the tropics are being designed and being developed. So I think in the last 1.5 hour, we hope to have this very enlightening discussion. And I would like to just move on because I think I would like to give more time to our speakers. And our first speaker will be Gaten Siu. And Gaten Siu, well, he describes himself as a world citizen. I love that, because I wish I am too. He's also the past president of the International Union of Architects, an avid world traveler, having visited more than 100 countries and 500 cities. And he has lectured in and teaches in France and in China. So I think he has a lot to share. He lives in the tropic himself, and he sits on the construction industry board, and a UN Habitat Special and envoy. So, Gaten, please share with us, your views, especially with regards to how you see the tropics, the challenges and of course the people itself. Please, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Norlisa, and hello to all the tropical people around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are at this time of the day. Uh, it's more of an experience of all my travels and bottom-up experience of what I've observed in many countries and in all continents, Africa, Asia, and Latin America, especially Central America, where most of these tropical cities are. What we have observed is that the theme, the title I have suggested is joyful chaos because it looks like a chaos, but it has its own organization and it's full of energy, connections, and layers. And you can move to the next slide. The whole of this of these cities are full of lessons and experience that we can share with the conventional or traditional way of seeing cities, which is more a Western approach. Cities are made of layers. Cities are made of layers like this fabulous French pastry, which is called 1,000 layers in French. And when archaeologists one day will excavate the city, some have already started, we will see time layers, daytime, nighttime, week time, market days, seasons. It's all changing all the time. They will see function layers where we work, we live, we celebrate, buy, sell, grow, produce, whatever. And then there are the visible layers, the streets, the squares, the neighborhoods where we live. And of course, most important, I believe, the invisible layers that are the people layers with all the exchange. people who live in a place and never leave it for their whole lifetime, live in one street, some who move all the time, and some who work here and live there. It's a bit like next, this book by Arundhati Roy, Indian architect and writer, who has written this book, The God of Small Things. When you read every chapter, each chapter is a layer of the story. You have to read the whole book, and then through the transparency, through all the chapters, you get the whole story, which is a bit the story of a city, like self-rule urbanism, self-organized urbanism next. And you will see, you see they have their own sort of geometry, their whole of pattern, almost instant creation pattern. Irregular but self-organized, sometimes regular grids, sometimes arrays of courtyards, linear branching, cracking, naturally adapted to contours, rivers, topography, and a sort of dialogue, permanent dialogue between the various parts of the city. A bit like this vegetable, you all know, the cauliflower, which is the small cauliflower. The small part of a cauliflower is exactly a small miniature reproduction of the big vegetable as a whole. This has its own principle. If you look the next slide, they have a principle of creating cities which is self-organized, shortcuts, cities with all-in-one function. You work, live, and play in a specific area, and everything happens in the same place. And these decisions, these choices are taken by the residents, the occupants themselves, mostly according to common sense, with a multiple number of interconnections of scales, from pedestrian to bicycle path, from low traffic to highways, like a fractal tree diagram. You see Dharavi from Mumbai, which is a slum area. You can see Istanbul, Naples, not an aerial view. All of them share the sort of same approach and sharing wall principle, minimal inner circulation, and of course built with availability and supply of materials in this. But they are governed by some principles. These principles is land use efficiency, energy sources, optimization of whatever little resources they have, and of course, inventive geometry for maximizing occupation in three dimensions, and of course, production of space. Next, please. And one person called Carlos Moreno now in Paris is a sort of experiencing that. Paris geometry is quite significantly explicit. It's not a city with a center. It's 20 little villages with 20 centers all connected in a radial form together. But each one of them is the informal sort of geometry, have its own efficiency and resilience. And it offers culturally a unique, a wonderful sense of social proximity. It is called now the 15-minute city. He wants to promote this. And this is part of what we see already in tropical cities. Next. And cities not only are made of layers, but they are made of connections. And by coincidence, all are beginning with C. City, celebrate, chaos, crisis, climate change, all are connections of area, which brings the city together with invisible connection. Next. And you will see the history of humanity, the next slide. Yes, the history of humanity is made of connections. Whether you take roads, internet, flight, pipeline, rail, whatever, it's huge in millions and billions. The only things that separate us are borders, only 0.5 million in the world. So we are made of connection. The whole history of the world is a history of mobility, of perpetual motion, of motion for survival. And you can see in the news every day, people move for climate refugees, for war, for better life, for work, and goods move, services, ideas, information, knowledge, and now capital also move all the time. When you read next, that you read this book, which is for me. It took me some time. Next slide, please. Some time to be able to understand this book. It's a small book, but very complicated book to read. Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. This book relates, it's a story of cities. It's a story of Marco Polo telling the Emperor Kublai Khan about the cities he has explored. Cities, trading cities, cities of desire, hidden cities, cities and memory, all these cities, all these fantastic places are, at the end of the story, a unique and same place. And cities, in fact, are made of all of this. Next. And cities are made of this chaos. This chaos sometimes brings uneasiness to all of us. We feel insecure, we feel that there is risk and danger, but at the same time, it brings opportunity, an opportunity for creativity, for growth, and a wonderful inventivity. In India, they call it jugaad in all these cities, which is innovation for survival. Next. And a few last words on the post-pandemic era, which also will affect the future of cities. Next, and especially tropical cities. Yes, in this post-pandemic, suddenly cities were empty. Next, cities were empty. When you see New York, Tokyo, Venice, Paris, all of them void, empty, but they were not void of connections. They were not void of opportunities. In fact, it was the death of distance. We suddenly communicated with a layer of exchanges and communication, goods, online shopping, e-health. Even this conference now is done all around the world with this connection. Where is home? Where is work? All this is blurred and frontiers are totally blurred. And some digital nomads say that home is where the Wi-Fi is, and that's it. Where is there? This is home. And next, and this will continue to happen. House or no house, accommodation or no accommodation, men will survive. It will be an hybrid of yesterday and tomorrow. Maybe the best of the past and the best of the future, but a future layer. I would like to end with this picture, which is in Bukhara, in Uzbekistan. Wonderful picture. And it was Genghis Khan. When he arrived in all these cities prior, he burned them down completely. Then he fall over this madrasa. He saw it's so beautiful. He said, "Oh, please spare it." So maybe we will be spared because of thanks to beauty and thanks to everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayton. Beautifully said, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's really the chaos that actually provides a lot of opportunity, and we can see how a lot of innovation is happening all around the world. I'm actually in Dubai attending the World Expo, and it's amazing, even to see the amount of innovation that's being done just, to address a lot of issues that the current cities are facing today and in the future. I mean, they say that the 21st century is all about cities, and cities is being dynamically changing over time, and especially here in the tropics. Um, so I think we have our second panelist here today, and is Datuk Dr. Ken Yang. Dr. Datuk Ken Yang is an architect, he's an ecologist, he's a planner, and he's an author from Malaysia. And he's also one of the early people who pioneered ecology-based architecture and tropical cities, actually. And I remembered that, learning even in a local university myself in Malaysia, your books actually, Dr. Ken, was how I was introduced me to tropical architecture. So I think we are really happy that you're here to join us today, and to share your work, and also your thoughts on designing for the tropics, especially in the challenges that we face moving forward with climate change and so forth. So over to you, Dr. Ken. Please, the floor is yours. Yes, Dr. Kenya, please go ahead. You're muted, sir. You have to unmute yourself. Okay, right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to talk about tropical design, which is really bioclimatic design. But bioclimatic design is a subset of ecological architecture. So next slide. So what are the key factors in ecological architecture? Next. Now, what is obvious, evident, is that the whole world, the vegetation is not homogeneous, it is different. Different parts of the world have different type of vegetation, as evident in this map. And in many ways, the ecology of the planet follows the vegetation and is also related to the climate of the locality. Next. For me, ecological design is the biointegration of these four factors. The first one is nature, which is the key infrastructure for everything that we do. In fact, everything that we do takes place in the ecology of the planet. And so I contend that sustainable design should start with ecology. Our objective is NPEI. I call it NPEI because net positive ecological impact. In other words, you should not build to have negative impact. The next is brown, which is net happiness society, because we're designing for people and we should try and give pleasure and happiness to people. The third is water, because water is actually it's potable water is in limited supply, and so we should design for net zero water. After that is gray, which is the buildings, the external infrastructure, and the internal infrastructure. And the last is energy, because energy is key to everything that we do on a planet. Without energy, our standard living and our movement systems and everything will not work. Next. Now, bioclimatic design, which is tropical design, is a subset of ecological design. Next. And these are the key factors. Now, tropical design is generally this built, but it's not exactly all the same, because you have next, you have hot, humid, tropical, you have subtropical, coastal tropical. So even within the tropical zone, a little minor variations which we have to take into consideration in designing for the tropics. Next. So I'm going to show an example in Singapore. And Singapore is about 1.2 degrees above the equator. So it's more or less spot on in the equator, but the temperature is more or less consistent throughout the whole year, and whereas rainfall changes, significantly towards the end of the year. Next. So the key factors in bioclimatic design is climate. You have to design to the climate, obviously. We don't have that many seasons in the hot humid tropics, whereas in the other upper edges you have seasonal variations. You have rainfall, you have humidity, soil insolation, wind, acceptable levels of comfort of the people, and it's variable depending on where you are and who you are. And thus build form orientation is important because that affects the building performance, building configuration, the shape of the building, whether it's rectangular or circular or square. There's thermal control, glare and glare. There's wind and natural ventilation, facade and data penetration, energy, and other factors. Now, if I relate this to the other ecological design diagram next, then it relates to nature, relates to human comfort, relates to the built environment itself, and of course energy. And water is less of a factor in tropical architecture except for rain. Next. Now, The easiest way to understand tropical architecture is to look at the traditional architecture of locality, because the traditional architecture of locality was built and derived through trial and error, through intuition. And so here's the image of the Malay house in Malaysia. And the key factors, the key components of the Malay house is a perfect example of tropical architecture in the hot, humid tropics. There's a sloping roof to keep out the rain. There's a deep eaves to keep out the sun. There's an air gap between the floorboards for cross ventilation, multi-layered windows, and you know, if some of the more sophisticated Malay houses, you have curtains, you have louvers, and you have a balustrade that can open out to the outside. And then in front of the Malay house is a transitional space, which is a social zone for interacting within the village and the kampong. And then the floorboards are spaced with gaps to let the wind through, and it's raised above ground, you know, to avoid heavy rain and animals. And so this is what we can learn. If you look into, let's say, in the northern hemisphere, then the thatch house or the you know the type of houses you have that are built traditionally reflect the climatic factors for design. So the first thing we look at when we design anything, if you want to relate to climate, is to look at the traditional architecture of the locality. Next. And so now I'm going to give an example, a case study of a building that we just completed. It was completed a few years back. It's in Putrajaya, which is the capital city of Malaysia. And Putrajaya is 2.9 degrees above the equator, and it's in the rainy tropical zone. And if you see on the left, right-hand side, all these are the different type of tropical climates. So when you talk about tropical architecture, we need to be a bit more specific, whether it is the wet and dry tropical, the semi-arid tropical, hot and negligible, and the humid tropical, and dry tropical and humid and mid-altitude tropical. Next. So this is the building that was completed. It was completed about 3 years ago. It's next to the bridge, and it is actually two almost symmetrical buildings with a gap in between. The gap is the axis between the roundabout, which is the Wawasan Merdeka, leading down through the Millennium Monument by the waterfront. Next. Now, the traditional way of keeping out the sun is use horizontal louvers. And we wanted to experiment and try something different. So we started to explore the use of fritted glass as a shading device in the tropics. Next. So what we did was to use glass, which is not exactly butt jointed. They are put close to each other, and then they have fritted. The fritted pattern is about 50% of the glass, and that to reflect the Malay culture, we took the songket pattern, which is a traditional fabric weaving pattern, so that you're reminded of the culture of the locality, and that it gives respect to the culture of the country. Next. We wanted to, because this lies along the boulevard, the leads to the Prime Minister's office, so we wanted to make it upmarket, and we faceted the facade like a gem. So the building is almost like a gem in the Putrajaya. Next. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, in a traditional Malay house, you have the house, you have the curtains, you have the balustrade, then you have the louvers. So in the same way, you know, the facade of this building is double layered. The outer layer is the fritted glass that you can see on the left-hand side, which is 50% clear and 50% opaque. The second image shows looking out from passageway. That's a passageway between the inside and the outside. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the passage looking out from the passageway. Next. So it's a double skin facade, and that, you know, to show that it is energy efficient, the typical office building uses about 210.72 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum as an energy efficiency index. And this one with a fritted glass uses about 136, which is about 70% less. So ineffective, is heading towards a low energy building. Next. Now this is a sun path in the tropics. So the first thing you do as in tropical architecture is to look at the sun path, and you can see the sun is almost above is above the equator. It starts on the east, and then you know, depending on time of the year is either a little bit to the north, a little bit to the south. And the third of the time is above the building, and the third of the time is the west. But the hot time of the day is probably between 3 o'clock onwards, and likely between 3 o'clock onwards. So we have to respond to the hot time of the day. Morning sun is hot, but it's not as dense and as uh, as uncomfortable as the midday or the afternoon sun. Next. And so with the Putrajaya project, what we did was to you can see the facade on the right-hand side is the west facade next. And so we are the west facade and the east facade next, please. They're not exactly the same, so that you keep out the hot sun. Next. Okay, this is the full west facade. The slots actually are where I have balconies sticking out, so people from inside can actually go out to balcony. And the balconies are to be planted. This has taken some time back, and so the planting cannot be seen on balcony in this early photograph. But you can see that it's not flat; it's angled to keep out the sun from the inner sides of the building. Next. There it is. You can see that the roundabout on the right-hand side, and then we stretch all the way down next to the monument, which is, and it lies along, there are two axes. One is the main axis leading to the Prime Minister's office. The other one is to the monument by the waterfront. Next. So here's the access to the monument. So that's why the building is not one big mass. There's actually two buildings, and what is the left of the land in effect determines the configuration of the building. And we don't, with the building, we don't want to have any part of the building or the center of each office space more than 20, about 7 meters from the glass wall. Otherwise, daylight cannot penetrate the insides of the building. So what we get actually is two almost symmetrical buildings, not exactly symmetrical, but they are chevron-shaped buildings, and the dotted line shows the access leading down to the monument. Next. So there you are. There's the monument right at the waterfront, which was also designed by us about 8 years earlier, and so that explains the shape of the building, because the access starts from the Wawasan, the roundabout, going all the way down to the waterfront. Next. And in between is the open space, is the promenade, and we have seating area. And off the promenade, underneath the building, are outlets where you can have restaurants. The people can eat and drink and enjoy the space in between. Next, this is actually a very popular space, especially during Independence Day. So you can see the monument at the end. Next. Now, what is this? Sorry, you want us to end now? Okay, so this is the biodiversity and local ecology, and you can see by the equator that the biodiversity is higher. Next. And so to address the ecology of the planet, what we do when we design is we create habitats. Next. And so, on our top axis, you can see all the habitats and the different habitats in different parts of the building. Next. And then we try to identify the fauna next that we want to bring back into the site. And then from there, we identify the flora to attract the fauna. So in this way, we have a system for enhancing the biodiversity of the locality. But before we started the building, the land was already cleared. It was just brown soil. And so they removed all the vegetation. The rainforest was there before. The palm oil is there before. And so the whole idea of ecological design is to bring back biodiversity and to enhance the provision ecosystem services. Next.
Yeah, Dr. Ken, maybe we can pause here for a while, and then when we do our discussion session, we can come back to your
No, Sophia, I'll just do 2 more slides and I'll finish. Next.
Okay.
Next. 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 One of the devices we had in the scheme is what we call the EcoCell, but we don't have time to discuss this next. EcoCell brings water, natural ventilation, and daylight to inner parts of the building. This was the Kowloon waterfront scheme that we did a long time ago. a few years back. Next. But for the Putrajaya project, this is where the EcoCell is next. You see, if I change the slide, it will be much faster, but you want to change the slide yourself. So, that slows everything down.
Yeah.
So this is the EcoCell that goes all the way down to the bottom of the building. Next. And for the vertical high rise, next, we create, we create habitats. Next, this is bringing biotic constituents back into the building. Next, these are the different patterns we use. Next, the one that we adopted in this one is the right one on the right. The next, so we bring the vegetation which connected just to the ground floor and all the way up to the building. These are the habitats in this building. Next. For the vertical building, we look at the ecology of the locality, then we identify species. Next, at the lower part, which is the dragonfly zone, the butterfly zone, the songbirds, and migratory birds. So these are the species that we want to bring back for the high rise. Next. 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 This is another one where we had a winding, spiraling vegetation goes all the way up to the top of the building. Next. 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 So just to end now, these are the key ecological factors. We have 4 infrastructures. There's nature, there's human society, there's water, there are the structures and infrastructure, and the last one is energy. Next. Next. So this is the traditional architecture, which, okay, so that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ken. It's always amazing to see your work, and how you really are very, not only looking at how to bring in nature into buildings, and how to bring in the whole ecological design factors into a space where people are living. So I think I would like to just move on to our next panelist, which is Dr. Gallo. Dr. Gallo is a human geographer and he's also a planner by training. He works as a senior researcher at the National Research and Innovation Agency in Indonesia, and he also chairs the Social Development Division of IAAP. His work and research interests covers a number of topics, and of course, one of them is smart city. And I think he's going to be sharing with us about smart cities in Indonesia, which is a very important topic, especially in dealing with the issues that we are facing today in the urban cities. And probably while you are at it, Dr. Gallo, you also want to reflect upon, how do we integrate nature into smart cities as well. Yeah, over to you, Dr. Gallo.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Moderator. So, very good afternoon, selamat petang from Jakarta, Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, and also dear participants. First, I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to share my thoughts and also views on smart cities in Indonesia and a brief reflection thereof and what can be learned for the plan Indonesia's new capital city in this event. Next, please. So to begin my presentation, allow me to first briefly explain the Indonesian unique geographical landscape. So basically, in terms of administrative unit, Indonesia consists of 3 layers of geographical level. First one is national, and then provincial and local. So at the local level, the country has the so-called kota or city, but also kabupaten or regency. So different from kota or city, regency is actually less urbanized area that still has to a large degree some rural characteristics. As can be seen in my slide, that the number of regency in Indonesia far exceeds the number of cities. So it should be noted that about 55% of the country's total population live in urban areas, while the rest, around 45%, still lives in rural areas. This picture differs significantly from, for instance, in Malaysia, where almost 80% of its population already lives in urban areas. So in this particular Indonesian context, the term of smart city has not only been applied to cities, but also regencies. There have been so many initiatives of smart city development in Indonesia that start to emerge since the early 2010s. These include initiatives that were initiated by the local government, but also those promoted by private actors. Among these initiatives, one of the most well-known nationwide smart city program would be the one that was initiated by the Ministry of Communication and Informatics, or Kominfo, back in 2017. The central government program is called as the 100 Smart Cities Movement that involved in total 100 cities and regencies. Next, please. So as can be clearly seen in my slide, that these Kominfo's smart city initiatives are mostly located in Java, the most populated island in Indonesia. Next, please. Based on around 5 years of smart cities experimentation in the country, there are some points of reflection that I would like to share to you in this very opportunity. First, given the country's geographical characteristics that I mentioned earlier, smart cities development in Indonesia have been applied to different aspects of development outside the traditional quote-unquote urban agenda. For instance, in several regencies or kabupatens, some applications have been used to support agriculture development, while in other regencies, the smart city agenda has been deployed to support, for instance, village development. In addition to this, some regencies have also developed particular system dealing with specific local conditions, including, for instance, here I saw in the picture, disaster mitigations. Next, please. Meanwhile, in terms of urban areas, despite sharing some commonalities, smart city agenda may differ from one city to the other. So depending on the development priority in each city. For instance, in Jakarta, our current capital city, as the public transportation has been quite developed, Jakarta smart city development has been also linked to support the better functioning of its transportation system. Meanwhile, in Yogyakarta, which is actually a very famous tourist destination after Bali, its smart city agenda has been geared towards things supporting its tourism development. Next, please. While it is not completely wise to generalize the smart city agenda in the country, there's actually a general tendency of such agenda in Indonesia that applies for both cities and regencies. So regardless of the initiators, be they national government, sorry, not yet, be they national government, local government, or technology company, the main element that seems to be always attached to the smart city agenda is smart government. So most of the local governments have digitalized their business system by, for instance, implementing e-budgeting, e-planning, or improving their internal administrative processes. In addition to this, different public services delivered to the general publics have been also digitalized. These services cover a wide variety of areas, including but not limited to business permits, education, health, and commerce. So it has been assumed that the injections of digital technology into the urban system in general and the government system in particular would make the public service delivery more transparent and faster. While part of this ideal is true, I believe that there is an inherent view that technology is neutral and therefore can automatically help humans. Here I provide some quotes that I believe worth noting. The first one, next please, by Frank Herbert, a writer and also a journalist, that saying that technology is but a tool for helping humans and for destroying them. This is the paradox of our times, which we're compelled to face. Next, please. And the second quote that I took here is also very interesting, related to smart cities. Poverty, inequality, weak institutions, and crumbling infrastructure cannot be solved by solely dashboards, sensors, and apps. Next, please. So before I zoom in into more detailed reflections on smart city experimentation in Indonesia, allow me to provide a very brief introduction to Indonesia planned new capital city. As some of you may have already noticed that about 2 years ago, the President of Indonesia has publicly announced his plan to move the country's capital city from Jakarta to an area in the East Kalimantan province. The planned area will comprise part of Penajam Pasar Utara Regency and Kutai Kartanegara Regency. To make it short, one particular concept that will be deployed in this new capital city is the smart city concept. However, and for me it's very interesting, and to the best of my knowledge, there is still no clear idea what concept of smart city or which elements of smart city will be used in this planned new capital city. Therefore, in this opportunity, let me continue further reflecting smart cities experimentation in Indonesia and use some points of the reflection as inputs for smart city policy process in the planned new capital city. Next, please. First, as I mentioned earlier, that the smart government has been the main focus of smart city development in the country. However, I think more work should be done as the quality of e-government in the country, based on this kind of index, still becomes an issue. Another important thing is evidence-based policy, in that this practice has not been fully encouraged. Although there are a number of cases where the local governments have aptly utilized big data in the policymaking process. Next, please. In relation to the smart government, there has been also a tendency to focus on the digitalization of services that oftentimes, in my view, tend to see cities more as a blanket phenomenon. Such a view overlooks the multi-dimensional notions of a place. Next, please. So, based on some anecdotal cases that I had the opportunity to do the field survey, the socioeconomic diversity of a place tend to be neglected. Questions such as public services that can be accessed by people without smartphones, people without internet connectivity, or people with low digital literacy remains unaddressed. Not less importantly, I believe, next please. Bottom-up initiatives have been also mostly overlooked. Rooms for collaboration and co-creation are quite limited, given citizens are viewed more as an object of development. Therefore, the value or degree of importance of certain services have been assessed mainly based on the government perspective. In some cases that I'm studying, some bottom-up initiatives have actually emerged. These initiatives have been mostly facilitated by non-government and also civil society organizations. In my view, such initiatives have appreciated more the diversity of different places and have addressed specific issues or problems closer to the everyday life of citizens. Here, I'm suggesting that smart city making in Indonesia should provide more rooms that can facilitate co-creation and also collaboration process to occur. Next, please. The last thing that I want to highlight here is that I think there's also a need to improve the overall human quality in the smart city making process and also in the urbanism in general. Not only in terms of digital literacy, but also how to utilize the digital technology and all the ICT infrastructure system in a better direction. A survey conducted by Internet Service Provider Association of Indonesia, for instance, has revealed that most of Indonesians have access to the internet for social purposes, particularly chatting with their friends, making new friends, and or to be more present or recognized in the digital world. Such activities might relate to a certain degree to one common youth culture in Indonesia called as nongkrong, or in English it means as hanging out and chilling, getting together with no specific plan or even topics to talk about. Next, please. So I end my presentation here. I look forward to hearing any comments and thoughts as well as having discussion with you. Thank you and terima kasih. So I give back the screen to the moderator, please.
Terima kasih. Thank you so much, Dr. Gallo. You're really spot on in terms of time. I really appreciate that, Yeah, lots of things and takeaways from what you have just shared, and it's really good to know that Indonesia is also really moving into smart cities to address a lot of the urban issues that you are facing. I like your quote on tools can help and at sometimes can destroy humans, and your point on inclusiveness and bottom-up approach, which is very, very important. And I'm just wondering that moving on, whether or not smart cities will really change cities, and whether or not they will change our culture, because as we know in the tropics, people always have that perception that in the tropics people are happy. It gives them that perception of happiness in the view of what the tropics represent. But at the same time, tropics are also going through a lot of changes and challenges. So we'd like to hear now from our panelists, our final panelist, which is Dr. Lee Min Hee. Dr. Lee Min Hee is the Director of Research at Singapore's Centre for Livable Cities. As we know, CLC does a lot of research on livable and sustainable cities, and her focus is on content development and also looking at international collaboration. And she has been leading a lot of research also with the National University of Singapore. So she's going to share with us her views on urban transformation in the making of a smart city in the tropics. And we definitely know when it comes to transformation, urban transformation, Singapore has a lot to share with us. So over to you, Dr. Lee Min Hee. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you to the Tropical Sciences Organizing Committee for inviting me to join your esteemed panel. And today I'll be sharing on urban transformations in the making of smart people-first cities, which is the theme of today's discussion. So next slide, please. As a small city-state of only 720 square kilometers and a population of almost 5.7 million people, Singapore is one of the most densely populated cities in the world. And in the face of many of the challenges we are facing today, Singapore has been able to leverage on technology as an enabler for city planning and solutions for our urban challenges. This includes our Smart Nation vision, which aims to transform Singapore into a leading economy powered by digital innovation and a world-class, smart and sustainable city. The vision comprises of three aspects: digital economy, digital government, and digital society. I'll be going through some of these examples in my next few slides. Next, please. Having the most sophisticated technologies does not make up a smart city. Technology must be appropriately harnessed to enable digitally integrated planning, development, and governance of our urban systems, with the ultimate goal of improving the daily life of residents. We can leverage on technology to improve the way we plan our cities, to design livable spaces for people, and take a systems view of how each of these services can leverage on technology to improve the experience of urban living. Next slide, please. For example, the Housing and Development Board, or HDB, has developed an integrated environmental modeler to study different environmental factors such as solar heat gain, wind flow, air temperature, and their combined effects on the surrounding urban landscape. This helps urban planners to design open spaces and optimize building layouts to improve the comfort of the living environment. Another example would be how the Urban Redevelopment Authority developed digital planning tools such as ePlanner to aid planners in visualizing and analyzing various data sets when developing future urban spaces that cater to the needs of residents. And the planner can identify areas with higher concentrations of senior citizens and analyze their access to healthcare facilities and services. So this is an example of how we use technology to help us plan as the population ages. Next slide, please. To create a people-centric ecosystem, digital technologies can also be harnessed to better identify the needs of residents and to allow the delivery of smart services to homes. One example is the Smart HDB Town Framework, which leverages on technologies to improve the design and maintenance of HDB towns and homes. The Smart Hub serves as a central data repository on estate services across HDB towns. It allows for a better understanding on the usage patterns of common amenities, where changes in these patterns could signify potential problems such as lifts usage, and checks can be carried out to resolve any problems promptly. Digital infrastructure can also be integrated into homes to allow residents to monitor their energy consumption patterns and to manage their home appliances in real time. This system can help reduce residents' monthly energy consumption. For elderly citizens who are living alone, the Smart Elderly Alert System can be installed to monitor the movements of seniors with the use of motion sensors, and families and caregivers can then be alerted should there be a fall in the home. Next slide, please. In addition to our ongoing efforts in developing geospatial technologies for data-informed planning and enhancing citizens' quality of life, the recent COVID responses, this approach has helped in our recent COVID responses. So platforms like URA's Space Out and NParks Safe Distance at Parks help residents to make informed decisions before heading down to the malls and parks during COVID times. Next slide, please. When implementing smart urban solutions, it is important to adopt a test and learn approach to ensure that such solutions respond to the needs of people and the city. In Singapore, parts of the city has been transformed into a living lab for companies and public agencies to develop and test innovative urban solutions on a smaller scale in real life before they are scaled up for the rest of the city. This enables the government and technology developers to embrace an agile mindset and experimental approach while ensuring that they can address the needs of people and businesses. For example, as part of the efforts to develop smart urban mobility, the Land Transport Authority collaborated with several companies to trial autonomous vehicles. More than 1,000 kilometers of public road were opened up in the western part of Singapore for testing of AVs in 2019 and 2020 in collaboration with our university, NTU, as well as with several companies to provide intertown services and longer haul journeys in a safe manner for the public. Next slide, please. Transforming into a smart city goes beyond technological solutions people have, and people have an important role to play when it comes to developing urban solutions. It is important to look at the processes of building a smart city to ensure that every resident feels that they have a role to play in the city and that they stand to benefit from it. Accordingly, technologies should be designed collectively with contributions from different sectors of the society. So for example, our Municipal Services Office developed the One Service app, which allows users to give feedback easily on the go, with these feedback automatically routed to the agencies in charge. The app's geotagging and photo taking functions enable the agencies to ascertain the exact location and nature of the issue at hand. Next slide, please. Finally, in our transformation to a smart city, it's important to ensure that no one gets left behind. Digital literacy is important because residents need to have the digital know-how before they can embrace smart technologies in their lives. To ensure that all residents are included in smart city efforts, Singapore has been integrating efforts to be digitally inclusive. For example, the Infocom Media Development Authority set up the SG Digital Office in 2020 to accelerate citizens' adoption of digital tools and to raise the digital literacy of less technological savvy individuals and businesses. Next slide, please. In conclusion, digitalization and technologies has given us many new possibilities to address emerging challenges for our cities. In our journeys to transform into smart people-first cities, it is important to remember that technology is just a tool and it has to serve the people. As such, people must be at the center of its design and development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Limin. Yeah, I think couldn't agree more with you that people is actually at the center and a part of the smart solutions. I think, I mean, that's the reason why we are creating all these solutions, right? To make the livelihoods of people more, more comfortable, more livable. And I think that's the whole objective of making cities more livable too. So thank you so much for that. And with that, I think we've conclude with all four paper presentations. I think that there's a lot of points that have been raised by our four panelists, and trying to put that together in context of the discussion of cities in the tropics, and definitely we hear from all the panelists, the importance of people, the importance of scale, the importance of the correct solutions, and the importance of government itself, which needs to be transformed in making sure that moving forward, we have the correct solution for cities in the tropics. I think I mean, we probably have not covered the entire, when we talk about cities in the tropics, we probably have not covered the entire city spectrum, because the tropics is so diverse, and we probably have not covered the entire landscape of what that represents. I would like to go to some of the questions that have come on board from people that have attending our session. And in fact, there's one specific question to Dr. Ken Yang, which is on the eco cells that you mentioned, Dr. Ken. The question is probably more understanding what an eco cell is, and how do you actually merge architecture and agriculture together? So the question is from Jenny, and maybe Dr. Ken, you would like to respond to that?
Um, well, actually, basically, there are two questions. The ecocell is just a device for bringing vegetation, ventilation, daylight, and fresh and down to the basement from the upper parts of the building. In that sense, it enhances the biodiversity of locality of every floor, and not just the roof and not just the ground floor.
Right.
Integrating architecture and ecology is a big agenda, and it's a long lecture. But essentially, the approach is to try and design our buildings like imitation ecosystems. And so a lot of my work is to look at the properties and attributes of ecosystems and try to emulate by design. So rather than try and merge architecture and vegetation, we try and change the architecture itself into what are called constructed ecosystems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that, that's a huge discussion, but I see all over, the globe now, there's a lot on research and experiment and even actual projects that are trying to also, bring natural or vegetation or food, in fact, into buildings. And well, I think that's a whole new topic that's together, and Dr. Ken have briefly give an answer there. Anyway, there's another comment here, and I think maybe this could be addressed to Gaten as well as Dr. Limin. And the comment is, what are your opinion on natural-based solution, especially with regards to building, and again, the question on integrated agriculture into townships. And there's a reference here being made to the village homes in Davis in California for smart city design. So Dr. Limin, maybe some reflection on relating that to how Singapore is also bringing nature-based solution, and Gaten, from your wide travel, How do you see this? Is this the, the best approach? Yeah, Dr. Liming, maybe first.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. It's a very relevant question because earlier this year we just launched the vision. Actually, I think it was last year. We launched the City in Nature vision for Singapore, which means that we want to be a city in nature, not so much a garden city. So it's the next step to respect nature and to be able to develop with it. And with that, there has already been a lot of nature-based solutions in Singapore's development history. You might have heard of our ABC Waters program, Active,
Yeah.
Beautiful, and Clean Waters, where concrete drains has been renaturalized into streams where people can actually, go nearer to water, touch the water, and play with the water. So so this has several benefits. It is actually a natural cleansing system for the water. It has the same amount of engineering calculations done to it for it, when there's a flood. The carrying capacity of such naturalized streams remain. And at the same time, it is part of our urban design and a way to bring people closer to nature. So it's no longer, something with railings, which you can't go near to, but it becomes part of a landscape of bringing people closer to nature and closer to water. And as part of our City in Nature program, we plan to plant, 1 million trees more. Things, something that Ken Young has done a lot of, Datuk Ken has done a lot of, and we enjoy many of the buildings he has built in the region and in Singapore.
Yeah. So Gaten, how do you?
Well, thank you. I have listened to all the speakers with a lot of interest. I thank you all for whatever you said earlier. And I want to greet my good friend Ken, who haven't seen him for years, at the same time. Let me allow me to say something. I think that the question seemed to oppose digital with nature. In fact, we've observed exactly the opposite, especially in African continent and even in Latin America. You will see that the digital has enabled nature to be relieved in a way. I will explain by a few examples. During the COVID time, you will suddenly, like nature and all the biodiversity has been driven away from the urban life in most big cities and urban environment. In Buenos Aires, last month or 2 months ago, you would have seen an invasion of wild animals into the central of Buenos Aires, in full of Argentina. They're coming back because there has been less mobility, less of urban life, and suddenly the environment has changed. In Africa, I would say in many, many African cities, the virtual connections, and most people are connected by smartphone, they do transfer money, they do even health or education online, because this is the only way to connect to the people, by the way. And there's no physical infrastructure between the villages and the city, no roads, no nothing. So the digital has allowed them to be connected without the physical infrastructure. And this will continue. And now they are so much connected this way that they prefer it this way. And it's cheaper for their government to give them connections instead of roads, highways, and buildings to provide the basic services. So technology and the digital approach has enabled connection to services which they were not usually able to receive before. So in a way, like to go back to my paper, which is about the joyful chaos, it's as if the chaos, the existing chaos is being structured virtually with the digital network without physically changing the city or the urban environment. So we are noticing, like after the COVID lessons, a sort of a balance between the usual way of bringing what we will call between commerce, civilization and development, we bring in it in a different way, softer way that is more respectful of the environment in nature. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's really, cities are finding it difficult to balance, and I think this is something a lot of cities are struggling to do. They either go all the way, into very urban kind of solution, and then they realize that, the importance of nature. So Dr. Gallo, I mean, Indonesia is going to build the capital city, and it's going to be built in Borneo, and which is, we know, when we say Borneo, it's green, it's tropical. So is there nature-based solution part of what the design for this capital city, Dr. Gallo?
Yeah, thank you. It's actually a very, very, quite a very publicly announced thing, but it's quite close in several things about the new capital city. So far as I know, the government has, in addition to the smart city concept, they also promoting that the new capital city will be developed based on so-called forest city concept. Although I don't really know the details of this kind of concept, but in general there is kind of tendency, a goodwill from the government that the condition in Borneo is not that very good in some sense. So by making a new capital city in Borneo, they are also expecting that more efforts will be done to, for instance, replanting more trees in not only within the area of the new capital city, but also the surrounding areas and in general in the East Kalimantan province. So this kind of thinking and also planning have been present in the mind of government, but the way that those ideal visions will be implemented is still under question, of course. And in terms of the relation of, for instance, digital technology and also urban development in Indonesia within the context of, for instance, ecological sustainability, if I might share a bit that for the last 10 years, the national government has also deployed a green city development, although there are some issues regarding the impact, because the focus has been mostly on developing the parks. So it's not that green in ideal vision, but on parks. But it's part of the goodwill that government has been done for making the cities more sustainable in a certain way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gallo. I think all eyes are on your capital city because it's being designed in the 21st century, where there's so much technology, there's so much learnings from the past, and I think
Yes,
that's why everyone is so interested in your capital city. You know, even I am. Uh,
yes, indeed.
so we have one more question here, and it's about gentrification. So I think we can discuss this openly with all the panelists. And probably we have observed this in Malaysia. Also, we have these issues, especially when we are building new cities, or we are regenerating cities. So probably we have different experiences all over the world with regards to gentrification and how this affects the people's actual needs in the city. So maybe some thoughts from all the panelists on gentrification. That I just, because we are all from different parts of of the tropics, and it will be good to understand how you observe gentrification in the work that you do. So yeah, I open this to anyone that wants to start first. Uh, Dr. Limin, maybe Singapore, I mean, Singapore is always marvelous to see how you do things. I'm just wondering, how much gentrification issues do you face in Singapore?
I think we don't usually use the term gentrification, when we describe our urban areas. I think most of the time we think of it as urban rejuvenation. So it is a policy that we have been adopting over the years. So for example, even the CBD or Orchard Road undergoes rejuvenation processes now and then, because there's a need to transform the urban landscape to keep up to changing needs and so on. So it is something that we have been continuing, and we have, of course, the conservation districts where it's not just conserving individual buildings, but conserving the district, and to, in a way, ensure that the kind of urban life that occurs in the district can be updated. So I'm not saying preserved, but updated, because again, it has to be kept up with the times, and the economic viability of the businesses that are in the areas have to be considered when these plans are put in place. So there is no, say for example, there's a dying trade for which there's no market, for it, then it's unlikely that there's a push to save a dying trade, because no one wants to buy the product, and the business will not survive anyway. So I think the thinking is that the market conditions have to be considered, and to keep an area alive and thriving, the market and economy, as well as the vibrancy of the street life, has to be retained and updated in the way that is suitable for the current, and will attract a diversity of people, instead of just for tourists and so on. So I think the idea of conservation is not to create touristic places, but to improve urban places for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I even read about Singapore, how with the COVID situation, that you're also re-looking at some of your prime location of offices and businesses on how to make it more livable, how to have a balance. So yeah, that's also, I mean, I guess here the gentrification, uh, transformation of cities, through the regeneration itself, I think probably maybe, but it's always understandable that, I like the fact that you say it's not only for tourists, it should be always be for the people. So any views from Gaten, from other parts of the tropics, where redevelopment it's still going on, or And how do you see people being affected by this?
If I may, I think this gentrification, as we call it, not necessarily for commercial purposes or functions, but rather for residential, looks like unavoidable all over the world. Whether you take the first world in European cities, American cities, as soon as you bring added value to city centers and to better services, and now with COVID, in a way, people flock in, they buy because their place gets a lot of plus value and therefore they sell for a better price. A few places I have seen that have avoided this is Paris and some cities in Spain, because the government controls the rental or controls the sale of apartment to certain categories of people. Like in social housing must happen like 20% of the city center of Paris. And you can't even use Airbnb or rent without declaring it to the government. So it's a full control, and this is why it's avoided to have full gentrification. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. But on the other hand, last word I wanted to say. Recently, because of the COVID, we have seen the other movement, that is people leaving the center of the city to go to a nearby village, which is well connected to the city, and they go to the capital city or to the main city like 2 days a week or 3 days a week only. The other days, they work online, connected like us by WebEx, Zoom, or whatever. So it's again, I think there will be two ways. We will see in the future a sort of hybridization of space, a combination of urban space and gentrified space in the centers of many cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaten. Yeah, I think that's correct on how you observe, especially with the pandemic that's happening. There's just one last question here that came. It's how can we promote collaboration among countries in the tropics, So, and especially in making it greener and closer to nature. So maybe what is Singapore's offering in terms of collaboration among countries? Dr. Ken, how can we help other countries in the tropics, So, and even Indonesia. So maybe how do you see this collaboration? Probably this is the last question that we can take because time is running out. So yeah, in very short answer, how do you see this collaboration working?
Okay, perhaps I will go first. So, as CLC is, of course, very active on this front, we convene platforms like the World City Summit, where we bring together, leaders and companies from all over the world to discuss urban solutions. We also have quite a few of these capability development programs where we work with cities around the region to come together to create action plans for more livable and sustainable cities. And of course, there's also very specialized frameworks like the ASEAN Smart City Framework, which Singapore initiate, where cities can exchange ideas and create bankable solutions for smart cities. So I think CLC is, very active on this front, and we hope to work with many of our cities in the region.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lee Ming. Dr. Ken?
Well, I think this is not really my area of expertise. When you talk about collaboration, you have to enhance the connectivity of people, and people won't do things unless there's an incentive or benefit to them. And so if you want to enhance collaboration, you have to give you incentives. But I was thinking something funny about what, talking about the dying trade. And the other day I passed an undertaking crematorium, and that's in the dying trade. participate.
Yeah. Gaten, anything to offer collaboration among countries in the tropics, you know? Or
Yeah,
Dr.
I
Gao?
think CLC is one of the leaders in that. I have been personally coming to CLC with a lot of other people from Africa, from the continent. And this sort of forum and platform connects a lot of different countries. But there are a number of other countries in Latin America and Central America, which are also tropical countries and share a lot of information, which would be very useful to all over the world. One country in particular is Costa Rica. And I know someone who actually runs the Institute of Tropical Architecture there. And maybe I'll connect that with you after the session by mail, and CLC would be interested to work. You know, like LEED and BREEAM has produced certification for buildings. He has produced a standard for certification for tropical buildings already in Costa Rica. So this might be very useful for a number of countries, and especially CLC, who is a bit the driver of all these connections. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gaten. Yeah. Dr. Gallo, last words from you on collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's actually a very, a very good idea and also a must. But unfortunately, I think I don't have the expertise to elaborate this issue more. But I think it's good to have a kind of, to continue the existing platforms and frameworks in which different cities from different kind of backgrounds in the tropics or in the global south can work together in a kind of collaboration. Even, for instance, as you know, that in different kind of cities in Indonesia, they've also already had, besides these platforms, they have also sister cities with other cities in across the world. So that's my short comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Carlo. So I think we've come to actually the end of the session. It's been, I don't think we have enough time with very esteemed panelists here. You know, we could learn a lot from Singapore, Indonesia, and Dr. Gaten's travels, and Ken Young's work in tropical architecture. But I think collaboration is important. Probably this platform through this international forum itself, this could continue, could be one platform of continuing this discussion. The work by Mahdi Science Award Foundation could continue this. The work that I do myself from Urbanist Malaysia, we also promote sustainable urbanization, and definitely we would like to work with cities in the tropics and sharing our work, So I think that there's a lot of room to learn from each other, because given the diversity in terms of scale, in terms of the level of growth that we have in the tropics, and the issues that we have, some cities have managed to overcome their issues. Some cities are still struggling to undo them. And I think learning from each other probably can move the whole tropic region into a much more livable and sustainable manner. So we have institutions that are strong within this region as well, like CLC, and that we could leverage on and learn from. And I think a lot of capacity building and smart city seems to be a choice that cities have adopted in their approach, with people being at the center of all that decisions that we have to make for the future. So with that, I'd like to thank the organizers once again, and thank all the four panelists for your time and your wise words and sharing. And we hope to meet everyone again. And thank you so much. And I hand over this back to the organizers. Thank you.